There we go. Okay. So, what did you write in your chapter, and what was that writing experience like for you?
Um, it was an interesting experience. I hadn't written, a book before, or a chapter for a book before. Um, so the experience of it, it was definitely a learning curve, and I appreciated all of the assistance and tips and tricks, and I made use of just jotting things down randomly as they came up. You know, even when I wasn't sitting down to write, things would just come up and I'd jot them down. And then the struggle was putting it all together um, in a way that was coherent and included all the bits that I wanted to. And so in my chapter, which I titled it was titled Nothing Real Can End, and it's about, love and connections between souls continuing, through lifetimes and through different incarnations. And yeah, it was actually a very beautiful experience, and I had to go back and go through a whole lot of session notes that I had to jog my memory and pick some things out. So I wrote there was a combination of things actually. I touched on a few different experiences. Some were mine and some were clients. But yeah, it was a really fun experience as well. Challenging but fun. I definitely learned a lot. I really enjoyed the process. Yeah.
Yeah, writing is like that. You think it's one thing, and then when you get going, it's something completely different. But what you did when you made notes and did things as you were moving along, that's very helpful because when you actually sit down to write, sometimes you do feel like, I don't know where to begin. I don't know what to write. I feel stuck. I feel blocked. And then if you've got all your notes that you've been gathering for all the time, then you can be like, oh, yeah, I remember saying that. I'll just bullet point some stuff. And then before you know it, it's just filling out those sentences and then getting it all organized. This comes first and
Yeah.
this comes next. And it's helpful to have feedback along the way, too. So that's very nice because then you can be like, I didn't think of it that way, or let me add some stuff here. And then you get
Yes.
feedback also from a reader's point of view because we don't always write with the reader in mind sometimes. And it's like, oh, yeah, I think a reader would be interested in knowing about this. Let me share more, you know?
Yes.
So it is very
Definitely.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I had my husband sort of read over the chapter,
Yeah.
and I was saying to him, read it, tell me, don't because I was sort of in the room and I was like, don't say anything to me until you finish the whole thing, rather than, pipe up every second sentence or something. But I
Yeah.
was like, read the whole thing, let me know if there's anything that doesn't make sense, from your point of view. If there's something that doesn't make sense or you feel like, oh, something's missing or something's not coherent, I was like, just read it and let me know. So
Yeah.
yeah, I bounced off him a little bit as well in the process,
Oh, that's
which was
helpful.
very useful. Yeah, very
Oh,
useful
that's
to have someone
exciting.
to do that with. Yeah,
Yeah, and even
yeah,
the topic of your chapter, it's so beautiful, the connection of souls between different lifetimes. I did touch on this topic a little bit with some of the other co-authors as we were talking, because naturally this topic comes up, right? Because
yes,
it's natural. We are all humans, we have human connections with others, and it's always a topic about, well, maybe we have a connection in another life, or in a different timeline, or whatever, because we have such a strong connection now, or there's something so relevant or something so important that we are doing together, or whatever it may be. So what is your perspective on that? Did you write from a point of view of challenging relationships, or did you write from the perspective of, souls coming together for different purposes? What did you write?
I suppose it's a bit of souls coming. I suppose I would classify it as souls coming together for different purposes. Because one of the examples I give in there was, without going into too much detail, but a lady who had this. unexplained connection with her husband's best friend. Like not a an attraction or like physical attraction, romantic attraction, anything like that, but just this, this knowing, this pull, like they knew each other. And yeah, I mean that was explained, and I obviously cover that off in the chapter of what their relationship was in the past and why they're sort of reunited in this lifetime in different circumstances. There was another example there of my actually, this was a bit of a surprise to him because I didn't tell him about this before he read the chapter, but I gave an example of one of my own regressions where I went to a past life with my husband, my now husband, and what our relationship was like in that past life. And how that sort of manifested in our current life and the things I had to learn, what my soul came here to learn through being with him
Mm.
that I didn't learn in that lifetime. So yeah, there's a few different examples. So I'd say yeah, it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that because number one, it gives you perspective in terms of your own life because we always like, oh, I wish I could choose my family, for example. And, I personally have a lot of challenging relationships with family when I was growing up, and I've had to learn to navigate those and go through the, different phases of those relationships and deal with a lot of the resentments that we have along the way and all the forgiveness stuff and understanding like, oh, these are connections and past life stuff I need to work through. So it's processes, right? It's like a lot of processes,
Yes.
and we get through the other side and it's kind of like, okay, I see why I chose this, I see why I needed this. So it's refreshing to have like more loving ideas come up too. Like it's not always about
Yeah.
challenging stuff, having past life connections is not
No.
always about difficult experiences. It can also just
No.
be another loving soul decided to accompany you and be a companion to you, in this
Yeah,
life.
that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
like that.
right. And even though there are, lessons that my soul had to learn and, it needs to learn through that lived experience, it, and that in itself has some challenges, learning always does. That's the whole point, in a way. If it wasn't challenging, you're not learning. Um, so yeah, there were some challenges, but they weren't, difficult situations or, terrible scenarios that caused these people, myself included, and others that I read about in the book, in the chapter. They weren't difficult or terrible experiences that they had to then come back and, relive, although that certainly happens, of course. But yeah, I've sort of come at it from a different angle, more about, I suppose love really is what it comes down to and love takes many different forms.
Mm,
And so, yeah, and ways that it shows up and
mm,
the way that, love, it doesn't end. It doesn't matter, when someone passes, they're still there. They just change form, and the love you have for them, that's real, and that, that won't die. That's
yeah.
always there. Yeah.
100%. It's such a beautiful message, especially now at this time, celebrating unconditional love and all that. So, from your experience working with clients, what are some of the more loving, beautiful experiences that you've had where clients have been regressed or you've put them through some type of regression and it was more of a loving, I don't know, experience versus the more traumatic ones?
Yeah, well, oh gosh, there's actually been so many. There's I think when everyone thinks of, reincarnating with someone again, they tend to sway towards the more traumatic, but I find it's, maybe 50-50, of what I see anyway. So there's so many, but there are so many where, you know, people have reincarnated in this lifetime, with a partner from a previous lifetime. Um, and sometimes the role changes, they may have been a male in that life and they incarnate as a female in this life and vice versa. Or the situation surrounding the relationship may be different. But all in all, whenever so I'm just casting my mind back and thinking, they all have come back because they either, you know, well, they obviously made that agreement to come back, but that bond is so strong, and they really just, I suppose, for lack of a better way of putting it, they just make a really good team. And so, and there might be things that both of them as a soul have to navigate independently through life, and learn separately, but being there for each other as a support as well. So sometimes people just come in or incarnate with you again because you do make a good team, and it is good to have that person by your side while you are navigating other challenges that you have to deal with. And sometimes it can be as simple as that. Which I think is quite beautiful, to be honest. Like it's, definitely better than the challenging and traumatic types.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's beautiful. And we don't realize all the support that we do have, not just physically in terms of human form, but also energetically and in the spirit form. We have a lot of support. But it's nice to know that there are some who just choose to be with us and come with us just to support. And, even just being a human is difficult sometimes. And having that someone that we can, even not knowing, we don't have to know that so and so decided this, but even just knowing that there's always someone I can turn to, there's always someone who's got my back, there's always someone who's in my corner. It really helps. Yesterday, I saw someone, he was old and he was homeless and, he was just suffering. And as we had an interaction with him, and as we were moving on, I was thinking about like, he's so isolated because where we found him, where we came across him, he wasn't in the city or in the town, he was like literally in the wilderness. We were taking a nature drive. So he was in the wilderness and there's not a lot of people he would interact with, and we saw him by chance because we saw these bushes moving and we were like, oh my goodness, what is that? We thought it was like maybe there's some animals there because we were in the wilderness. But it wasn't, it was this man. And I was thinking, I wonder what is his story from that bigger perspective. Yes, of course, we have the compassion and we help him in the physical, we did. But in terms of like, what is his story? Why did he choose to be alone and isolated and living in, because I mean, he was old and it looked like he was there for a long time. And he didn't look sad by any means. It looks like this is his life, you know? And I was
Mm.
like, that is something. That is something. I don't know if I would have the capacity to do that. He's much stronger than I am for choosing that.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot of strength that goes into choosing that type of an experience, whether it's having a really difficult life in whatever way that looks, whether it's homelessness or physical or mental health issues, so many different things, physical disabilities. Uh, these are really brave souls. It's like they've just decided to go all in and learn as much as they can in one lifetime, to, hurry, to be able to integrate that and perhaps have less incarnations, but they've just decided to go all in and take on all these lessons. I'm sure from the other side, it always does. It looks so much easier because, they I suppose from that perspective, when you are on the other side, you have obviously that greater awareness, and that human life that you're planning is a small, very tiny little blip on the radar, and anything that you go through that we as humans perceive as traumatic, or horrible or whatever, they know that in the end you're going to return to source and you've learnt your lessons and that was the purpose. And it's that tiny little blip, it's almost insignificant. It's like go learn the lesson and come back. And yeah, it's a very different way of looking at it. These people that go through very, very hard times.
Yeah, and also, it's not just, well, the feeling I got is it's not just about them because even people that they interact with, they leave an imprint on them. So you just by
Yes.
interaction or association or even just looking upon them, you have your own internal kind of things come up. Like, there are certain things that come up and you're like, oh, wow, this is giving me a different perspective, or maybe I can, improve in a certain way, or how can I be of assistance, or whatever it may be, where that wouldn't have come up if you hadn't interacted with them or seen them or come across them. So it's like they're
Yes.
choosing this hardship affects other people and their growth too, and their
Yes.
ability to uplift and whatever it may be, and maybe even trigger some people into an awakening. It depends on the state that they're in. I think a lot of people have that ability to be a catalyst for others. And I mean, we all do in some way, but some are
Oh,
just like
yeah.
that trigger is so quick and it's so instant. You just come across them and there's this thing that comes over you like, oh my goodness, who am I and what am I doing in this life? And how can I improve the lives of others?
Yeah, and that's actually that's a very good point because these people that have these difficult lives, more often than not, they're the lessons and the lessons that they're here to learn and the reasons why they're going through that particular experience and the reason they chose that particular experience, more often than not, is not just about them. Yes, there may be things that they have to learn and experience. But as you said, it also impacts those around them. And whether that triggers an awakening in someone or, causes someone to look at things from a different perspective. Yeah, there's so many different possibilities there, but you're right. It's not just for that person or for that soul. There's everyone around them that it impacts.
And it's so selfless, and it is an also an act, I think, of unconditional love, to make that decision and be like, I'm gonna go and live in extreme circumstances so that I can be a catalyst for others as well, and not
Yes.
just learn my own lessons and elevate that way, but for others. It's like, I don't know, selfless in
Yeah.
a way, it's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
selfless.
Yeah. And I've come across experiences or sessions with clients where even people who have treated them terribly through their life or, were the cause of some real pain and heartbreak for this person, you know, if it's uncovered, the reason why, often funnily enough, it does come from a place of love. Because, and that's something I think a lot of people struggle to wrap their head around. They think, oh, this person treated me terribly, or whatever it is that they've done. How could that have come from a place of love? But when you zoom out and look at it from the perspective of the higher self, it sees and it acknowledges that, oh, yes, but through that experience, you grew, or this is what you learned, or this is how you developed and evolved. If you hadn't had that experience, you wouldn't have done that. So, although, there may have been that soul agreement to, okay, yes, we're going to incarnate together and I'll make an agreement, I'm going to treat you terribly and whatever. But you have to look at the reason behind that. Why was that organized? Why was that, planned? What did you have to learn, or in what way did you have to grow from that experience? And so even those moments can, yeah, come from a place of love, which I understand is hard for some people to wrap their heads around.
Yeah, 100%. I resonate 100% with that because I have firsthand experience with that. And you know what my experience is? It's so funny because let's say there's a person and they are challenging you and you're like, oh my goodness, I know I need to learn these lessons and I need to, go through all these things. And you do. And maybe that even includes like cutting them off, not from a
Hmm.
perspective of like, oh, ego and this, that. It's just protecting your peace and, that kind of thing. And you're
Mm.
doing it lovingly. You've done it from a place of forgiveness and acceptance and love. It's not just like anger and frustration. It's not that. You've dealt with that, right?
Mm.
And
Hmm.
then you heal and you understand and you have compassion and you see why they are the way they are, not from the higher perspective, even maybe even from a
Mm.
physical, like you can see, oh,
Yes.
hurt people, and I can see that your trauma is causing these you to act out in this way, and you have that kind of feeling towards them. And then you grow even more and you heal and you accept, and then you come to a point where you're like, I've dealt with this, I've grown through this experience. Maybe they have to, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and and even things like forgiveness.
Yeah.
A lot of people think, how could I forgive what this person has done to me? And there's a big difference between, I mean, really, forgiveness is for yourself, right?
Yes.
When you forgive someone, it takes it off you.
Yes.
I'm not saying someone treats you terribly, forgive them, have them back in your life. Like there's still, boundaries. You still have to look after yourself. But the idea is by forgiving it, you're no longer giving, once you've gone through the experience, you're no longer giving it power over you. You're able to let that go, and that is huge. And I think people think forgiveness means you know, all butterflies and rainbows and love and take these people back into your life and pretend like nothing has happened. And that's not the case. Forgiveness it's for you. It takes that off you. And it no longer has to weigh you down because by people not forgiving the other person, and that's a whole process in itself to go through and to get to, but by not forgiving them, really the only person that it impacts is yourself. It doesn't impact the other person, especially if they're no longer in your life. What do they care if you forgive them or not? They're off doing their own thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've dealt with that, and I've forgiven and I've, accepted. And then you feel like, oh, maybe they've grown too. Maybe they've, gone through a certain experience and they've, I don't know, elevated or whatever.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you open those doors again, you open your heart again, and you're like, let's see how we can move forward. And then after a while, you realize, okay, just because I've grown through an experience doesn't mean you have to. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean that we're on the same journey, we're on the same path, we have the same intentions. And then it's like you have to go through that whole process again. But it's a lot quicker and it's a lot easier the next time round. And it makes more sense. And you can do it from a place of not so many emotional strings attached, you know? So it gets
Yes.
easier.
And
Um,
you find that also as you go on and other people or situations that come into your life that, you know, could amount to that kind of hurt or whatever it is that you've gone through, you recognize them much more quickly and you're able to, detour or whatever it is you have to do around that situation. But, if you hadn't had that first experience, how would you recognize the next and the next? And so, the learning, it's not just, on that soul level, it's also helps you navigate through your current life. You learn, and I mean, we see it all the time. People learn things. I mean, even the most basic of concepts, like if you touch a hot stove, no one's told you never to touch it, so you touch it, it's hot. Okay, you don't do it again. It's like it's the same sort of concept. You learn to recognize behaviors in people and you learn what is good for you and what is not good for you. But you have to have had that experience. You have to have learnt learnt, what is good for you and what isn't.
And there's always comfort in knowing that this is just a temporary experience, and it's all for, your growth, and it's all for evolution, and it's all for, elevating your the reasons why you decided to come in to begin with. Like, we get caught up in all the stuff, we get caught up in all the relationships and the dynamics, and this
Hmm.
one and that one and this thing and that thing, and then we get attached, and then there's labels, and then there's, my sole purpose, and you need to feel important, and then there's ego. There's so many things
Hmm.
that we can just get wrapped up in, but
Oh,
there's
yeah.
always that comfort in knowing, like, this is just, a temporary thing. It's just a really elaborate play. I'm so
Yeah.
invested in this role that I feel like it's the only thing I'm ever gonna do. And
Yeah.
I guess it's fun from that perspective, a
Yeah.
little bittersweet to think that, it's gonna end, but then once it ends, you'll be like, oh yeah, that wasn't such a big deal anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And, one thing that's always, stuck with me from the very beginning since guiding clients through their regression and their past life is, at the end, I always ask them, you know, what, what their purpose was, or, what they had to learn in that lifetime. You know, often, obviously, clients also want to know what their purpose is in this lifetime, or yeah, and through the experience, I take them to different important days. And one thing I've noticed is that a lot of things that we tend to get hung up about, I always say as humans, we get hung up about little things. We're upset because I don't know, piece of furniture we ordered came in the wrong color, or like just things that in the moment seem like a really big deal. But, of all the clients that I've had and all the different days of their lifetime that we've gone to that have, been really important and things like that, they're never trivial little things like that. It's never, so I really like that. It's given me personally a very different perspective. So sometimes when things bother me or I feel myself getting, upset, I like to, if I can remember, catch myself in the moment and just pause for a moment and think, okay, it sounds a bit morbid, I know, but I think, okay, when I'm gone from this life, and if I was reviewing my entire life and I look back on this moment, does it matter? And it's a really interesting way to look at situations in life because I have yet to come across, in years, I've yet to come across a moment where I've thought, actually, no, this doesn't matter. you know oh, sorry, where I've thought, yes, it does matter. I've always thought, no, it actually doesn't matter. It's quite interesting, but yet a lot of the little moments, like time spent with loved ones, things like that. Sometimes in those moments I look back and or I look at it and think, if I was reviewing my life from the other side right now, how would I view this moment? Is it important? And whenever you're spending quality time with loved ones, the answer I immediately get is yes. Like, this is important. You know, it's interesting, isn't it? You get a very, very different perspective when you try and review your own life from the other side while you're still in the life. It's but
I love
yeah.
that. I love that. And I think, on that note of, don't wait till you die to have a life review
Yes,
and be like, I could have done this differently. You can review your life while you are living, moment by moment, and be like, oh, I think that this isn't something that I want to be doing right now. I should be more present with my family, or I could do this, or like, don't wait till you die. Live while
exactly.
you are alive and be present. And there's
Yeah,
nothing wrong with evaluating moment by moment and making adjustments. That's all of life. And if you don't do that, that's when you end up regretting things when you die, and being like, oh, I knew I should have done that, but I didn't, and I had a feeling that I could have. It's a little too late for that. And this is the only life that is this life, this one, you
mhm.
know this is the only one, so enjoy
That's
it. Like,
it.
you're never going to be this you again.
No, that's it. And like we were saying, although it is a very, very small blip on our whole existence, it doesn't make it unimportant. It's still, the life that you're in now is still very, very important. You still need to, although we know it is only temporary, it doesn't mean that we throw the experience away. I mean, at the end of the day, we chose to come here. We chose to have the experience that we're having. So do your best at it. Like say, evaluate as you go, change direction if you need to, you know, you know, really, really take it all in and take in that human experience, because that's what you're here for. So although it is, a very tiny blip and a lot of things don't matter when you get to the other side, I think it's still important that we keep in mind that we did choose to be here. And so really we're not honoring our own soul by just going, oh, it's only temporary, I don't care about anything, and just, I think that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And on that note, thank you so much, Nadia, for sharing
Thank
with
you.
me about your chapter, and I look forward to reading it. And if you haven't already, people get your pre-order. It's only 99 cents for volume one, two, and three on the Amazon pre-order. It's on ebook right now. So get it. Nadia's chapters in there, read it along with all the others. Beautiful, wonderful insights on topics that we kind of don't go deep enough in. So, you can look at it from multiple perspectives. You can see what all of these wonderful authors have to share and make up your own mind, build your own perspectives, understand from your own perspective what you want to take from it, and really use it to integrate into your life, improve the lives of others and those around you, and use it to uplift those, who need the upliftment. So thank you so much, Nadia. I'll put all the links
Thank
in the
you.
description. I'll put the link to Nadia as well, her website where you can find her, learn more about her, book with her. She's a very gifted and talented QHHD practitioner. So find her if she's in your area and work with her. And yeah, thank you so much. I'll speak to you
Thank
soon.
you.
Bye.
Speak soon. Bye.
Bye.